Hi, I'm Chris. This is Finding God at Work. This is the final episode of our first series, Imagining Work. Thank you for joining me on this 14-episode walk through different stories about work, different images of work from the Bible. I hope that it's been helpful for you. It's caused me to return to some of my own struggles with work and prayer and think about what images are really shaping my mind and my heart when it comes to work. I hope it's helped you do the same and helped you, most of all, connect with Jesus. And as you know, during this series, we've been asking the question, what story about work am I living in? And so I thought it would be appropriate to conclude with a story from Scripture about the imagination, about what we can see in God's world. So this one is from 2 Kings chapter 6. And just to give a little bit of context, this is during a time when the people of Israel were in conflict with a nation called Aram. And there was a prophet in Israel at that time, Elisha, sometimes referred to as the man of God in this passage. And this is about Elisha and his servant. And it's about what his servant is able to see in God's world in the course of the work that they're doing in the work of prophetic ministry and in this great conflict between Aram and Israel. The story actually has some humor to it because Elisha as a prophet is basically like the CIA for Israel. He's using his prophetic insight to gather military intelligence about the plans of the king of Aram, which causes problems for Aram because Israel knows what he's planning to do in terms of military strategy. So that's where the story starts. We'll start there, and then we'll get to the part that's about the imagination, about what we can see. So this is 2 Kings chapter 6, starting in verse 8. Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such and such a place. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, will you not tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord the king, said one of his officers. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go, find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back, he is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, O Lord, open his eyes so he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As the enemy came down toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, strike these people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness, as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, this is not the road, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are looking for. And he led them to Samaria. After they entered the city, Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see. Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were, inside Samaria. Then the king of Israel saw them. Or when the king of Israel saw him, he asked, Elisha, shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them? Do not kill them, he answered. Would you kill men you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. This is a really delightful story. Again, it has that humor, right? Like you can even hear in the king of Israel's question, should I kill him? Should I kill him? Like he's just so ready to commit this atrocity against prisoners of war. And yet Elisha restrains him, right? Elisha ministers the mercy of God, even in this extremely violent ancient Near Eastern military context. He says, these are prisoners that we've captured. Let's let them go back. And that mercy is likely part of what leads to the king of Aram abandoning his attacks against Israel. So we see the mercy of God in this passage. We see a kind of cleverness, even humor in the way that God resolves the situation. But we also see this motif of eyes being opened to see. So with the captured Aramean soldiers, they're blinded, and that's what allows Elisha to lead them away to a different place. And then their eyes are opened, and they see, oh no, we've been captured. We thought we were in command, but we aren't. And then even more poignantly, there's the moment with Elisha's servant, where he is so afraid because he can see the enemy troops. But Elisha says, don't be afraid. And Elisha prays, Lord, open his eyes so he may see. And then the servant can see that there are other horses and other chariots, horses and chariots of fire, the forces of God's angel armies surrounding and protecting him and his master Elisha and all of God's people. This is, for me, one of the most powerful images in the Bible of the reality of God's kingdom being made visible to someone. It's not that the horses and chariots of fire weren't there until the servant had his eyes opened. They were there the whole time. There's a spiritual reality surrounding us at all times, but we often just can't see it. We often forget that it's there. And so when God opens the servant's eyes, he sees the previously unseen real. He sees the spiritual reality all around him of the love and power and protection of God in the middle of a very concrete and scary situation. And this is what we need God to do for us. We need him to open our eyes so that we can see the reality of his love, his power, his protection in our lives, in the actual circumstances we inhabit. We don't just need stories that are inspirational, but then feel detached and disconnected from the actual stresses we face in the workplace or at home. We need something that's just as real as the difficulties we face when our alarm goes off in the morning. And that's exactly what God offers. He offers us the opportunity to see his reality. And so when I use the word imagination or the phrase imagining work in this series, it's very far from suggesting that we are dealing with something imaginary. Rather, it's through our imagination that God helps us grasp what's most real, what's most true about our environment. The things that are usually invisible or forgotten or unseen, we can bring to mind through the images of Scripture and begin to see. And that changes our relationship with God and our relationship with the difficulties we face at work and everywhere else. An example of this in somebody's own life, somebody that's probably familiar to some of us, is the writer C.S. Lewis. He has a book in which he narrates his own journey of coming to faith because he was a skeptic for a long time before embracing theism and eventually the way of Jesus. The book is called Surprised by Joy. And he describes an experience he had very early on. This was before he had any conscious religious awareness. And he was reading a novel by the author George MacDonald. And the name of the novel is Fantastes. And he talks about how something happened to him while he was reading the novel. Something opened up inside of him. And he writes, "That night, my imagination was, in a certain sense, baptized. The rest of me, not unnaturally, took longer. I had not the faintest notion what I had let myself in for by buying Fantastes." So even though Lewis isn't consciously coming to a Christian faith in this moment, he's saying that something has happened to him. His imagination has been baptized. Just by reading this novel written by a devout and wonderful Christian author, George MacDonald, he catches something in his vision of reality, and that begins to shift something inside of him. Well, if this is true for coming to faith, right, that this was something that caught Lewis's imagination and eventually led to his conversion, this is also the pattern for growing in faith. Leaning into that metaphor of the baptized imagination, to baptize is to immerse, to saturate. And so if we want our imaginations to be baptized, we need to soak in the images of the Bible, the stories that God gives us for understanding his unseen reality all around us. And that's what we've been trying to do in this series, is just look at those images that can woo our imagination, that can baptize our imagination, that can lead us to see things that we haven't seen before, that really are there in God's care for us. And this is, of course, exactly what the Bible tells us to do. So, famous verse Philippians 4:8 says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." We're explicitly commanded in Scripture to set our minds on these things, to invite the images of what is truly good, truly noble into our minds and hearts so that they can begin to change us. And this is what helps us answer the stories that misshape and misdirect our imaginations about work, those stories that we started looking at the first part of this series. Because ultimately, it's as we see the reality of God's love and we see Jesus that we overcome the allure of those other stories. Because Jesus is the one who helps us reconcile with our pain. He helps us find contentment as we reconcile with the limitations of our jobs and the imperfections of our work life. He helps us reconcile with the work itself, working as for Him and with Him. And He helps us reconcile with the rest of life, not worshiping work, not sacrificing things on the altar of work that should be kept sacred, but being able to attend to everything that truly matters. Because Jesus is ultimately the one who accomplishes these things in us. Jesus is the gardener. He's the artist, the priest, the builder, the king, the servant, the friend, the emissary. When our imaginations are open, we can see the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around us. But most of all, we can see Jesus. Lord, open our eyes so we may see. Do your work in us as we do our work with you.
Thanks for listening. Finding God at Work is a production of Mission Central, a ministry based in Aurora, Illinois, dedicated to forming Christians for mission in everyday life. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to this episode to get 10 minutes of teaching on faith and work every Tuesday and Thursday. To get resources to go deeper with each podcast series, read our blog, and get info about upcoming courses on faith in the workplace, go to our website, missioncentral.church.